Alright, Winter Orb Ascendant build overview. Let's get this started. So right away, just going to get it out there. This is not a budget-friendly type build. This is really geared towards people who have some currency to spend or maybe ready to reroll a second character and want something that maps quickly, maps nice, but is also considerably tankier than most other speed mapper type builds that you would see. And most of the cost gets drawn into things like multi-modding items and some uniques, but we'll get into that when I go over the gear. Real quick, toss in a map, show the build in action. Let's get some harbingers on it, why not? While I go over some of the basics. So it is a Winter Orb build. Winter Orb is a new cold skill that is similar to BV in that it stacks up and does bonus DPS per stack and just kind of auto attacks things for you. The difference between this and BV is that Winter Orb, when I channel, you can see my duration goes away. You stop losing your stacks while you're channeling this skill, and you only get the timer back once you're done with the channel, which makes it actually easier to sit at high stacks compared to something like Blade Vortex, but somewhat harder to sit at low stacks because there's no difference in maintaining 12 stacks for me as there is maintaining 2 stacks. But as you can see, once we start going, you can kind of just charge through. The Winter Orb takes care of killing all the mobs for you. And if you're not distracted by things like recording a video, you can zoom through maps pretty damn quick. And it's also very tanky. Got over 8,500 life at the moment, alongside some Slayer Leech from my Slayer Ascendant sub-ascendancy, constantly healing me for about a little over 4,000 life a second. And it's got okay single target. It's got enough single target with this setup to take you through normal map bosses when you want to go for more like end game type bosses like tier 16s or Shaper or Elder, all that. There is a way to get that going as well, but what I found the best way to do it is a weapon swap to a staff with some castle channeling shenanigans, which I'll go over later towards the end of the video. But for now, let's jump right into the gear. So first things first, the uniques. I've got a Pyre Ring because I'm actually converting my Winter Orb to fire damage. And the reason for that is I wanted to. It sounded cool. But so I have Pyre Ring and I've got Cold to Fire somewhere in my supports for a total of 90% cold converted to fire, which gives us some cool synergies since Comb's Heart gives fire damage. This weapon we've created makes enemies explode for fire damage. And we can run Anger and Herald of Ash, which both scale with fire damage. And then so when we lower resistances to fire with things like the helmet, with things like combustion, it actually scales the explosion and the Winter Orb and the Herald. And so there's some cool synergy there. I don't know from a pure damage or clear speed perspective if it's necessarily better than going cold with like Herald of Ice, but it's different. I like it. It's been working really well, so I'm sticking to it. And also, the other thing about converting to fire is things like this weapon, which has 2 different mods on it. The first 2 listed there, where you gain non-chaos as extra chaos. They kind of double dip when you convert damage, because it gains my cold damage as extra chaos. Then it converts the cold to fire, and also gains the fire as extra chaos, so we're taking advantage of that, which you'll see on some of the other items as well. But, yeah, so, other unique besides the Pyre, Comb's Heart, lots of HP, some fire damage, makes you big tanky. And then that's really it for the uniques. We've got a bunch of rares, though, and most notably a bunch of multi-modded rares. The first one being the weapon, which is just a Shaper Mace suffix for enemies explode, dealing 5% of their life as fire damage. It's similar to Impulsa's, but there's no like need to be shocked condition. And you can see you can put quite a lot of damage onto this. And one of the other cool things I've done is chance to deal double damage while focused. You'll see that in a couple other places. The focused mechanic, which is a new 4-second buff with a 12-second cooldown that you get the ability to use it once you put an item with focus on. And I've got 3 different items with things related to it, so when I hit it, I get the benefits of all those items. Which the second one comes from the shield. It's got the exact same crafted thing. Chance to deal double damage while focused. And then mine just got spell damage, some spell crit, some life, some res. Really, the most important thing there is the life, the spell crit, and the resist. If you can get one with spell damage as well, great. Or even fire damage, or even cold damage. Whatever you want, just damage. Then next up, let's see. Let's go to the gloves, which is where the Winter Orb is actually sitting. It's a pair of Shaper gloves. I lucked out big time. Mine are a 3-stat pair of gloves, which are, again, a multi-modded item after that. But they have supported by slower projectiles, supported by faster casting, and mine happened to hit crit multi for socketed gems, but really what you're going for there is the slower projectiles and the faster casting support, so you kind of get a 6-link in your gloves. And the way to do that is just alt-regal, alt-spam. If you hit one of the supported by gem mods, you know, augment it, regal it. If you hit the other one, great. Maybe you have to throw in a null in to get rid of some bricked 3rd stat, or just multi-mod it from there. And then you want to multi-mod on +1 AoE gems and +1 projectile gems, which are both, I believe they're both veiled modifiers, so you have to have them unlocked from unveiling them somewhere. Or find somebody to do it for you if you're in a trade league. And it ends up with a essentially 6-link pair of gloves that also give +2. And turns out it's almost as good as a body armor. And you get to wear Comb's Heart. So, problem solved. The next bit of multi-modded gear would be the ring, which is pretty standard. We saw these previously before all the crafting bench shenanigans where people would get, you know, Assassin's Mark rings and then multi-mod them. The difference now is that there's way better mods you can do. So I've got life on mine, I've got % damage prefix, and I've got a flat fire and flat cold hybrid damage prefix. And then I crafted lightning and chaos res as my suffix, which I don't think it's necessarily the wrong choice, but I could have also crafted +1 minimum endurance charge, which you'll see on the next multi-modded item. Yep, there's more. Amulet. +1 minimum endurance charge, that's why I've got this one charge over here. You can't consume it, you can't do anything like Immortal Call to make it last longer, but you get the benefits of the charge, so you get the 4 all res and more importantly the 4% fizz mitigation. I could have also put it on my ring and had 2 of them. But anyway, back to the amulet. So I fossil crafted this one with aberrant fossil and pristine fossil, not for any of the mods they give, but just to make chaos and life related rules more common. The big thing I was looking for was that second mod, the max life leech per second to max life leech rate, which just improves how much you heal with your leech. And then I was hoping to also hit the other mod, which is the non-chaos gained as chaos. And then I think I had to... They're both prefixes. When I made mine, I got lucky, and the only other mods were suffixes, and I was able to lock the prefixes and then scour it off to just that. And then I multi-modded it. I went for max life. I went for the minimum endurance charge, like I said. And then the other mod is another focus mod, which gives Volpact while focused, which isn't really important. You get Volpact on the tree. But the big thing is 10% damage leached as life while focused. 10%'s a lot. It's really, really strong at building up leech buffers so that your overleech from the Scion Slayer keeps healing you for like 30 seconds to a minute to 2 minutes to 3 minutes after you're done clearing the map. If you're looking for a cheaper amulet, you really want that craft, that focus craft. And then ideally the next most important stat would be that max life leech, which is from it being an Elder amulet. But it's not necessary, it's just a nice defensive boost. And so I think that's it for the multi-modded items. And I've got a pair of boots that I purchased. They just got some life, some res, some move speed. They have strength. I don't think I needed that. No, they just happen to have strength on them. And I got the enchant for leech as life and mana if you've killed recently. The mana leech doesn't matter really, but the life leech, I just wanted as much leech as possible to make it even easier to keep building up a giant leech buffer, which is just how you ensure that you just constantly get healed, even if you get interrupted by things like syndicate encounters where you stop fighting for a while. You don't want your leech to just go away. And then I've got a belt. Actually, probably by far the cheapest item. It's just a weird... I might have made this trying to craft for something else. I don't know. It's just life and res. It's a Stygian belt. And it's got a... That's not my Onslaught jewel. I have an Onslaught jewel somewhere for Onslaught on kill. And then the helmet was... minus fire res aura helmet. You get that with a scorched fossil. I think I was crafting it with scorched and pristine to try to get life rolls. I didn't hit any though, but I hit some nice res, so I just crafted life, called it a day. And I've got the Winter Orb has +2 max stages enchant, which is by far the best enchant for the build, I think. It's not necessary. Actually, out of all these things, it's probably the least necessary of like the expensive upgrades. I don't know what they're going for at the moment, but you could settle for, you know, even no enchant or just like a damage enchant or something if you want something a little bit cheaper. But that minus res aura is really nice since the build's kind of lacking fire penetration. And yeah, so before I hop into like the flasks and stuff real quick, just gonna show the jewels because this is where a lot of the other stuff comes in. So I've got a bit of a trio going on here, although one of them's missing. I took it on a different character. But Might of the Meek, another Might of the Meek that would go right here, and Unnatural Instinct, the holy trinity of Scion jewels, where you buff up a whole bunch of these small nodes and then end up getting a whole bunch of extra stats from this one especially. You can see when I mouse over it, it shows all the stats, and it's actually even higher than that. But a bunch of spell damage, life, tons of crit multi down at the bottom. That's like one of the strongest things of the build, and it's where a lot of the cost goes because the Might of the Meeks are like 3 or so exalts, and I think the Unnatural Instinct is over 10 exalts now. But that's what makes this tick, and it's what makes a lot of Scion builds really strong. The other jewels are mostly just rares. There's the Onslaught jewel, Onslaught on Kill to go faster. And I've got, I think, one more, a Watcher's Eye, right, for anger penetration, which I actually haven't even checked this in Path of Building. There's a good chance that the crit multi while affected by anger is actually better for single target DPS than the pen, since there's a good chunk of chaos damage being dealt here. And it's probably a lot cheaper too, so something to keep in mind. Then my last jewel is a Anatomical Knowledge, which I didn't actually want to use one. I was trying to get a rare with this corruption, but it was mainly for that corruption, Corrupting Blood Immunity, which lets me run my Dying Sun instead of another magic flask for the bleed immune. And then on the topic of the flasks, Dying Sun, great, but unless you have Corrupting Blood Immunity, I think you pretty much have to drop it so you can run a bleed flask, because I think these are more important. The Adziri Flask is another source of your leech. It gives chaos res, and it gives non-chaos as chaos, which is again really strong. Or it gives elemental as chaos rather, pretty much the same thing. I've got a Chemist Basalt Flask of heat for mitigation, and then the free stuff. Diamond Flask of warding, and Quicksilver Flask of adrenaline. And onwards to the tree. Gonna try and get through this real quick. So, like I've said, Slayer, Sub Ascendancy, that's for the Overleech. Life Leech effects not removed at full life, lets you build that buffer. Then I went for my second class. I debated between Elementalist and Pathfinder. Ultimately went with the Pathfinder, partly because Path of the Ranger puts you in a really good spot to get some stuff on the right side of the tree. But Pathfinder's good as well. Gives some speed, gives some Ellie Pen, and then it gives Flask Charge sustain for bosses, which is really important if you want to do any sort of bossing or just any sort of drawn-out encounters. That 3 Flask Charges every 3 seconds is really good. But most importantly, it puts us over here, which lets us get to Vol Pact easily, as well as get Acrobatics and Phase Acrobatics, which are a huge defensive boost. And then we kind of just cruise up that way towards the Shadow, getting life, getting crit along the way. I'll link the Path of Building and probably just a straight up profile link for the passive tree in the video description if you want to look at these. But it's mostly just getting spell crit, getting life, getting crit, getting life. And then from the actual Scion side of things, we've got those 3 jewels I mentioned. We've got the Scion Life Wheel. We've got some skill effect duration. I don't have this node because when the other Might of the Meek is here, it makes notables not do anything. So you can see it actually says nothing, whereas normally it would be 25 skill effect duration. So it doesn't help you. Then we go up to Witch. Again, life, crit, more life, Templar life, some AoE. Just mostly traveling for life and whatever damage we can get. And that is the tree. As far as the Pantheons go, they're actually more important than usual because you want this one, especially with that first upgrade. For the Slayer Leech, you get 50% increased recovery rate of life and energy shield if you've stopped taking damage over time recently, which effectively is a 50% multiplier to your Leech, which currently on this character is 20% by default, plus 5%, so about 25% life a second. You double it from Vol Pact, so it's about 50% life a second. But if I get hit and I stop taking damage over time, I get another 50%, so it's like 75% of my life per second. And the way that we take advantage of that is Blood Rage, which deals physical damage per second, and then it also lets you get attack speed and frenzy charges. It's really nice. But alongside counts when damage taken, Immortal Call. So when I get hit, if my Blood Rage is on and there's no other damage over time is going on, the Immortal Call goes off very briefly, making me immune to the fizz damage, which means I've stopped taking the damage over time from Blood Rage, and it triggers that and just gives you a huge boost to your healing whenever you get hit and trigger it. But then it also gives reduced shock effect, which is nice because we don't have a shock flask. Gives chaos resist over chaos for damage over time. Again, really nice stuff. So overall, that one's really good. And then the secondary ascendancy is kind of preference stuff. I really like Growth Coal. I use it in almost every build. And you can put whatever you want. Like, depends on what you're doing. But I really like that one. And I think that's the setup. But before we go, as if this video was not long enough already, we've got one more thing to show, which is that cast while channeling weapon swap that I mentioned. I can't really do it something in the middle of a map because you can see it takes quite a lot of gear swapping to really get it fixed together. But this is how I've been killing bosses, and I'll go over it as soon as I get all the stuff together. Essentially, I'm taking my gloves off because they don't offer much if my Winter Orb isn't in there. And then I'm taking my weapon and my shield off because I'm using a staff. And I'm also going to take out that Onslaught Jewel since we're focused on bossing. We're probably not killing things, in favor of the Vigil to make Vigilant Strike. Give us some nice, much needed fortify against these bosses. And then I'm going to take these. So now what our new setup looks like, I've got the Blood Rage over here with the Flame Dash and the Arcane Surge. We've got Winter Orb in here with Ice Spear, Ele Focus, Controlled Destruction, Cold to Fire, GMP, and a cast while channeling staff. And like I said, I've got the Vigilant Strike as well in the gloves to keep that fortify up. And it's just going to boost the single target damage through the roof. And then the other gems, the only other thing that I hadn't mentioned was the Stormbrand here, which is linked to Combustion to lower fire res. You just cast that on anything that's too tanky. And just lowers their resistances a bit. So we're going to hop into a Forge of the Phoenix map. Just a real basic one. Just want to get a show of the damage in the map stuff. The first thing that you'll see is the map clear is not that bad, even with the staff setup. This is the ice spears you'll see start flying out. They don't really do much of anything for the actual clear. It's really just the Winter Orb still. And it's not super fast clear, but it's not bad for what it's going to do against the boss. So I'll just try to rush to and skip our good friend Fortification. Not a fan of the Fortification encounters on the build, unfortunately. Probably the one thing that's been kind of irritating to deal with because the Winter Orb doesn't know how to target the doors properly and kind of just hits all those ads that spawn. Missing some mobs, but that's fine. The one big thing that slows it down here, more so than like not having shield charge, is really just my duration's much lower. Which the duration doesn't matter when you channel against bosses, you'll see here.
Can I not have it a moment's respite?
Because it sits at max stacks while you channel. A little bit sloppy. Could have done it a lot better, but there you go. Boss is dead.
This is the key to a crucible.
Maybe should have done a practice run because
The sanity of the mind.
it can go much quicker, but you get the idea. We're gonna just keep that one because this video has dragged out quite a bit, but that covers it. That's the whole build. Hopefully it's helpful. I'm gonna put a bunch of links to POB stuff and whatever other useful things I may not have completely covered or could be useful in the description, so make sure to check that out. If you have any other questions, leave them in the comments. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Hope you liked the video. Hope you liked the build. Hope it helps out. I'm out of here, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.